all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week, along with my fellow husky, hairy, huggable homos, the original 4-H's of the LGBTQ podcast world, we get together to talk about movies either current or classic. And this week, we've got something very current coming at you. We are reviewing Black Adam, the new film from the DCEU starring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Definitely jazzed to get into this conversation. But let me introduce those aforementioned co-hosts. Jim Pugliafico is with us on the show. Hey, sweetheart, welcome.
Thanks. I am here. We're coming to everybody on a different night this week than we normally do. So it's starting off the week on a Monday with a movie review. You know, our Movie Monday one-time segment.
Indeed. We normally do this on a Tuesday night, but someone has tickets to a show. Will, that's exciting. So we're coming at you on a Monday night instead. Will, welcome. Tell us who you're going to see, my friend.
Well, yeah. First of all, hey guys, glad to be here. Always fun to chat movies with y'all. But yeah, it's about damn time. I'm gonna go see Lizzo tomorrow. So it was like, gosh, gonna record tonight or see Lizzo. Let's sort up to the guys and see if we can change it to another night because I kind of want to do both this week. So
Gotta be excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
She puts on a killer show. I've seen her once at a festival before, but I haven't seen like a dedicated show of hers. So yeah, I'm here for it.
Very cool. Well, enjoy. Speaking of people being here for it, we have a few folks who are hanging out with us already in the live chat. Feel free to say hello, folks, and certainly avail yourself of the chat to share your thoughts about Black Adam as our review gets into high gear here in just a few moments. I feel like this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I know a little bit how Jim feels. Will, I know absolutely nothing about how you feel. So there's a lot for me to uncover. But anything we need to do or wrap up before we get into our movie convo for this week?
Oh boy. Let's see. You already mentioned you know how I feel, so there's that aspect of it. Like
I said, I know a little bit about how you feel because we kind of
about the movie, not how I physically feel. I got you.
I know Brad knows a lot about that.
Yeah,
I mean, right. I am your husband, so
yeah.
Anyway, Sam Wise in the live chat says, "What's up? Just saw this movie yesterday, so I am ready." Welcome,
Good.
Sam. Glad to have you here with us. We're ready too. So, in case you are new to the show, or maybe it's been a hot minute since you've listened, we're going to talk about the movie spoiler-free for about 10 minutes. We'll each take turns going in round-robin fashion, giving our initial thoughts on the film, whether we think it's worth seeing in theaters, whether it's worth streaming, whether you should avoid it entirely. But of course, those are just our thoughts. It's always best to see a movie for yourself and make your own decision. But if you want to hang around and see what we thought, please feel free to do that. And then we'll give you a fair warning before we open up the can of spoilers and let them all out into the world. We want to protect you, so just listen for that warning if you're listening live. If you are listening through the magic of digital tape delay on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, however you consume your podcasts, feel free to use the time index in the show notes that'll be there relative to when you're listening to skip around as needed between the initial segment and the spoiler section. Whatever works for you, feel free to do. But all of that said, Jim, Will, here we go. Our discussion of Black Adam. All right. So let's kick this thing over to Jim. Jim, tell us a little bit about what Black Adam is. And of course, your initial thoughts. Was this something that you think people should rush out and see? Should they maybe wait for streaming, avoid it entirely? Where did you come down?
Sure. So, what we have here is the latest DCU movie called Black Adam, and I'm just going to read from the um, IMDb synopsis, so I don't spoil too much on this movie, since I'm not I'm not a guy who's steeped in all of the angles of the comics. I don't want to start saying stuff that could spoil things. So if you do get spoiled by this blurb, you can blame IMDb, not me. So here we go. Nearly 5,000 years after he was bestowed with the almighty powers of the Egyptian gods and imprisoned just as quickly, Black Adam is freed from his earthly tomb, ready to unleash his unique form of justice on the modern world. So, yeah, we have this film here, which stars Dwayne Johnson, as Brad said, Aldous Hodge, Pierce Brosnan is in this. We have Contessa Swindell, Sarah Shahi, a lot of fresh faces. I think on the in the cast, like on the way down. Dwayne and Aldous and Pierce kind of being the most recognizable. So yeah, so this movie is look, if you're a fan of these comic book movies and you want to go to a movie on a weekend or a weeknight, or wait till it streams and then sit on the couch and crunch popcorn while you watch a very action filled loud movie, this one is probably going to fill the bill. I think for hardcore comic fans, I think they might like this one. I'm not sure. I am not a hardcore comic fan. And unfortunately, the movie didn't work for me because I don't think it's really made for me. I think it's really made for that comic fan, that person who wants nonstop action. Because in this movie, you get a lot of action. This is like one of the most kinetic movies I've seen in a long time, and that includes a lot of the Marvel and DC stuff. I mean, at times it reminded me of a less robotic Transformers movie. Like it was just a lot of crashing and banging and fighting and flying and so forth. If you've seen the trailer, I think you get a sense of it. It didn't work. It didn't work well for me. A lot of the stuff, at least, so this movie has a hard job to do. It's got to introduce Black Adam into this universe first, and then it's got to set him up with a story and something to do and kind of define who this character is going to be going forward. And in the end, we'll talk about kind of what that is and how that evolved when we get into spoilers. But for me, look, it's there's a lot on the screen. They throw a lot. I mean, I don't know what the budget is, but it's all on the screen. I mean, it looks it looks pretty good. There's perhaps we can start picking apart some of the wonky CGI because there's a lot of it to pick at, but it gives you a lot. It's loud as fuck, this movie. I noticed, at least in the theater we watched it in. But like I said, it's not. I have a hard time not recommending this movie because I know it's not mine to recommend. I would say to me, looking from the outside, it seems like a fairly well-made comic book, superhero, supervillain, anti-hero, whatever you want to call it, origin story and movie. It's got The Rock in it. We'll talk about his performance a little bit. His characterization of this character was pretty flat. I didn't, it was just, he had the stoicism from the get-go, and that was it. You got monotone Black Adam throughout them from beginning to end. Maybe a few flashes of some dimensionality there, but not a lot. I think, for an actor that oozes charisma, I don't know if this is the right role, because I think they want this character to kind of be very one note all the way through and not show, and that charisma doesn't really flow to the surface for me. So for me, I would say it's a pass, for people like me, but not everybody's like me. So if you're a comic book fan and like that high CGI action, loud stuff with with a decent origin story that's probably tied to all the comics, it may be for you, but not for me.
All right. Well, Jim, thank you so much for giving us your initial thoughts. I'm sure we'll hear more about some of the things you kind of alluded to during spoilers, but we'll get to that. Will, how about for you? Did this movie fire on all cylinders or was it a misfire?
It's interesting, Jim. You said, that this movie maybe wasn't for you, but part of that's because like you weren't like a hardcore you weren't like a hardcore comic book fan, hardcore Black Adam fan going into this, right? And so it wasn't made for you. I am a hardcore comic book fan, and I don't think this movie was made for me either. So now I struggle to figure out who it might be made
Wow.
for.
Yeah.
So I didn't hate this movie. I think that, like every so often a movie comes along that you have to sort of like join in on the punching bag online syndrome of, and I think there's a little bit of that happening here. And then likewise, there's a lot of people who are like snapping back the other direction to like, no, it has to be a 5 out of 5 star because I have to counter it. That I don't know. That the whole mentality doesn't work for me. This movie is fine, but like kind of like that, like shruggy fine type thing. You mentioned something about the characterization, and I think that's exactly the issue I have here. We really have two groups of characters. You have like Black Adam and his storyline, and then you have, and they're in the trailer, so you can talk about them, the Justice Society of America. So different characters like Dr. Fate and Hawkman
The
and Atom
Do-Gooder
Smasher
Club.
and Cyclone. Yeah, and so what you end up with is each one of them works very, very, very differently. The Black Adam character is not interesting at all, but he has an interesting arc. And so I wanted to be interested, but I couldn't because of the characterization. The Justice Society characters, all of those actors are doing a lot with very little. The characters have next to nothing to do, but every single one of them just dripped charisma every time they were on screen. And I wanted to see more of them, but their arcs are nothing. Their arcs are nothing. Even the one that sort of has an arc, because we haven't seen these characters before and we haven't done anything and they don't get enough time, it feels flat for what we have here. So it didn't really do either of those things super well. And the other problem that we have here is that this is a movie that, just like a lot of these films, because the Snyderverse stuff came first, these films are having to try to both exist within and exist without of that space. And so there's some things where the visuals and parts of this movie are just muddy and don't look great. And then there's times where there's more color and there's more energy. The Cyclone character special effects look really good, and I kind of liked seeing that. But I don't know, like this wasn't a good looking movie. And we spend so much time in all of the action stuff that I never got a chance to care about the characters or really care about their stakes. And this movie commits one of my major movie sins of the very beginning of the film just starts with voiceover narration telling us the backstory of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, once upon a time, there was this, and then there was this, and then this other thing happened, and here's all the things you need to know. Now it's time for the movie. And like the only movie that I think that's done that maybe the past like 20 something years that's worked has been Lord of the Rings. Literally everything else, whenever they do that voiceover narration backstory stuff, it just feels like you're on pause waiting for the movie to begin. And I feel like it definitely feels that way here too. I don't know. Some of the stuff works. I really liked Pierce Brosnan in this. I really liked Aldous Hodge in this. I really liked some of the supporting actors when they had stuff to do. The Rock is all over this movie, but also doesn't get to do anything in this movie at the same time. So it just really feels like I don't know, he kind of feels like an albatross kind of hanging around the neck of this movie, and that sucks for your lead who you're trying to set up as the next big thing in your joint cinematic universe. So I don't know. There's probably I think there's some things to enjoy about this. There's some things worth watching in it. It's a fun enough time, but did I enjoy the experience? No, I just didn't not enjoy it. It just sort of exists in that limbo right in between where I can see the better movie that this movie could have been. I can also see the worst movie that this movie could be. And in some ways, that's almost more annoying because at least if it was worse, it would be more interesting.
I know what you mean, Will. Yeah, about we talked about the characters being flat, but I want to hear what Brad has to say, and then we can jump in and free for all this thing.
It's interesting. So we've got Jim on the side of not a comic book reader. We've got Will on the side of hyper comic book reader / expert. And you guys are posing this question of like, who is this movie made for? I think this movie is made for people like me who fall in the middle on that spectrum. I read some comics. I don't like read tons and tons of them. I don't have deep knowledge about Black Adam as a character. And so I think maybe this movie fired a little better for me than it did for you guys. It took what little bit of knowledge I had and kind of built on top of that and filled in a lot of blanks for me and really used the JS. Well, I guess it's not the JSA. They didn't say JSA. Use the Justice Society as a mirror for Black Adam to kind of figure out, okay, who is this character? What are his morals? Where does he draw lines? Does he draw lines? It was a really interesting way, I think, to learn about this Black Adam character. And the movie certainly does some reveals. You learn more about this character. Obviously, Will, you mentioned the voiceover at the beginning. We kind of get the quick and dirty origin story, but as the movie goes on, we continue to build on that. And I thought that was a really cool way of exploring this character without having to read, a whole run of Black Adam comics to get up to speed on who this character is, what his powers are, what he can do, where he's been, all of that stuff. I don't think this movie is a great movie by any means. I will say I enjoyed it. I was entertained by it. I did get a little bit of action fatigue. Jim, to your point, there's a lot of it, a whole lot of it. But one thing that I do appreciate about this movie, and I know it's kind of like meta knowledge, a little bit like adding on top of the movie another layer. Dwayne Johnson has been trying to get this movie made for 15 years. This is his pet project. It's gone through many hands of people who would potentially direct and craft this film. And, he could have very easily had it made 12 years ago and been like, I don't know, a lot shittier than it maybe is right now because there wasn't as much like passion and interest behind it. We've had 15 years of Marvel movies and some not so great DC EU movies kind of shepherded into being before this one, kind of rose to the point where it was greenlit, produced, written, shot, made, all that good stuff. So, this is a hard spot, I think, for The Rock to be in, and I never thought I'd be a The Rock apologist, but I know you guys say that he's flat, maybe he's wooden, maybe he's not that engaging, maybe he's just not exciting to watch in this role. As the Black Adam character, he is an anti-hero. And he is very serious. He's very dark, at least from what I know and understand about the character. So to see The Rock bring those character traits to life, that's what I expect, just based on what I know about the character. I don't think he's this super warm, charismatic, gregarious guy like The Rock normally is in a lot of his films. So I don't know. I think that's a hard spot to be in if you're an actor playing a superhero who's like that. Do you step outside the bounds of that character to add, more of those warm, gregarious things in? I don't know that you do. I don't know that your director is telling you to do those things. So, for me, I think this is it's a fun movie. It's definitely worth checking out in theaters if you feel safe doing so. Otherwise, maybe check it out on streaming. When I think about a lot of the other DC EU movies, um, I think I liked it better than Wonder Woman 84, which Wonder Woman
Fair.
84. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it did some good things, but I also have some gripes, and I'm sure we'll talk about some of these things in spoilers. But as usual, I'm in that place I love to be, in the middle of you two guys.
Between a rock and a hard place.
You know, if we're gonna do hot takes on this movie and comparing it, I think I actually had and this might sound blasphemous, but I thought I enjoyed Morpheus better than this movie. Because I think they built the characters better. Like you understand the relationship.
Real quick, Morbius, the vampire movie, right?
Morbius, sorry. Morbius.
Okay, just
see how sucky I am at these.
Well, no, I was mainly doing it just because I was like, it's either that or the new Matrix movie.
Thank you. No. I have no problem with the correction. Yeah, Morbius. I liked it better. I thought the characters were developed better. I kind of cared for. There were two main characters in that movie that kind of played off each other, right? And in this movie, I just didn't get that. And I understand Black Teth Adam has been kind of locked up for 5,000 years, and he gets busted out, and he's kind of a fish out of water, right? And this is a new world. He doesn't really know how to fit in. And that's pretty, to the movie's credit, it did represent that very well. That came across. But to a fan to somebody like me who doesn't know the history at all, zero, they start calling him Teth Adam. And I'm like, wait, what is, I must have missed something, like the flash by, because I swear the movie was called Black Adam. And I'm like, wait, I didn't know he had a different name. And and then I'm like, well, what are these Justice Warrior, or what is it? Justice Friends. Warriors. So yeah, the Justice Society. Friends. Sorry. that came, and for a while I'm like, oh, you know what? I bet these guys they're acting like they're good, but they're really bad, and they're gonna be villains, and he's gonna have to fight them all, and that's gonna be the movie. But I don't want to get too far into spoilers, because these are all things that I was feeling as the movie was unrolling in front of me, and I'm not going to blame the flatness of the character on Dwayne Johnson, because I think Dwayne Johnson's a really good actor. I think he can do this character. I just think it's the way the character is written, that he has to be this stoic, like one note, I'm going to punch everything in the face character for 2 hours.
I don't know, Jim.
I don't know.
I'm a little on the other side of that one, because I think that more than anything, this movie made me I think it revealed some weaknesses in the Rock's acting. And what I mean by that is, we see a lot of the Rock playing a very specific type of role, right? Like that sort of charming, a little bit goofy, a lot bit cool, and a lot bit kick-ass while doing a well-placed quip type character, regardless of what type of movie he's doing. And he does that remarkably well. I mean, it's what he built his wrestling career on, and we see touches of that in all of the movies he does. I think when you take him away from that, I think that was the biggest issue I had, going back to Brad's point. I think that this character, with a stronger actor, I think you can play stoic. I think you can play fish out of water. I think you can play tough as nails. I think you can play anti-hero with more range and nuance if you are a good enough actor to be able to do that stuff. I think The Rock, he wants to be in that charismatic, charming quipster mode so much that when he can't, he sort of is in this baseline. And the only time you see him really come to life is there's a couple of moments in the movie where they're teaching him how to catchphrase, or they're teaching him stuff like that. And it's a little bit of that Rockism stuff. And you get to see a little bit more of him opening up and coming to life in those scenes. So it's one of those tough things. This is his baby. He wanted to make this movie. And I think when you champion something, you should 100% be the guy that like steps into the role. But at the same time, I also question if he was the right guy for the role. And that's the weird dichotomy of this movie.
Well, Hammy says maybe he was right for the role because Dwayne Johnson kind of looked great in the suit. I don't know, or something.
Well,
That he kind of looked like a version of him in the comics.
Is that what he's saying, or is he asking?
He's asking.
I think he's asking.
He's asking. If we think that if he's a good character, or is it, or does Dwayne Johnson just look like a version of Black Adam in the comics, and they made a movie because of that thought?
So I think that he looks fine. Like, in the comics for years, the way that you would he looked exactly like the Shazam character, but with pointier eyebrows, like more of like that V shape, like eyebrow that like they used for comic book characters who were supposed to be like snarky, arrogant.
Was he more of a villain in the comics? I gotta ask.
Started as a villain to Shazam, and then sort of like in the 90s, they did let's actually do an anti-hero thing with him instead. So not terribly far off. Like there are definitely elements of like his backstory and kind of like where he's at in the comics that come from it. Yeah, no, but he looks like, we have the Shazam movie that came out 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 18 years ago, 100 years ago. I don't know. The pandemic's ruined sense of time. But and I feel like without being like a photocopy of the character, like sometimes he looks like in the comics, I do feel like there are definitely some parts of the way The Rock looks in this, big beefy guy, fills out that particular suit that sort of like looks like a dark mirror of Zachary Levi character? Is that his name?
The
Shazam in Shazam, yeah. The Billy Batson.
Which is weird because we got a trailer of the new is it a new Shazam movie?
Like, new Shazam movie
right in front of this. So
well, of course,
again, I was having comic whiplash because I'm like, wait, he's Shazam, and then there's another character with the same.
So I think we'll get into that in spoilers. We're unspooling a lot that we probably want to scale back. Hey, just a couple of other comments from the chat before we jump into spoilers. Derpy501st says, if this film was shortened by 2 hours and 5 minutes, it would have been great.
You would have had more time on your Saturday.
You'd have had 10 minutes of movie, but maybe that's all we needed. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe we have a short. Also hearing from D Geek Will. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, make sure you do. He's got some fun reviews. But he says, hey, boys, just popping in to say hi. Seeing it tomorrow as a birthday gift for myself. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, other Will.
Happy birthday, Will.
All right. So, Jim, Will, our Will, original Will? I don't know. Are we ready to take this to Spoiler Town?
Shazam!
Yes.
That's yes. I don't know.
Okay. All right. For those of you who have not yet seen Black Adam, if you don't want to have your innocence regarding the movie's plot ripped violently away from you, this is your time to step away, go see the movie, come back for the spoiler section after you have done so. If you have seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers, continue to listen, of course, at your own peril. But spoilers are officially fair game. All right. So, sorry, I was leaving a little bit of a pause. I was actually going to jump in and ask a question, but it sounds like both of you guys are raring to go. So
go your question. I think that's going to be the most interesting place to start.
All right. So Jim, you mentioned before the spoiler jump that maybe there was some confusion. You weren't sure. There was a Shazam movie trailer before this movie. Why is Will saying Shazam? Are they connected? What is this all about? Do you guys think that as moviegoers, do you think that the links they built into this movie connected strongly enough to Shazam to make it apparent that Shazam and Black Adam are like antitheses of each other?
From my starting point, I would have to say no, because I was that confused about, why is everybody saying Shazam? I thought that was related to this other guy over here that I just saw in the trailer. But I guess not. And then I even had to have a conversation with you afterward to explain like what is the Shazam thing? Why is he doing that? And and I guess it goes back to like one wizard that gave powers out to a couple of different dudes, maybe, or maybe more, who knows. And they can say this as a command and it enacts some kind of powers. But yeah, I think that was lost on me. I don't know if the movie kind of expected the audience to know that, or it wasn't important. But given that it was juxtaposed against another superhero that used the same thing, it seemed kind of weird that it wasn't mentioned.
It's hard. Like, one of my issues with the movie is that it does a lot more tell than it does show for important parts. But at the same time, like, maybe they could have done a little bit more with this one element. Like, I knew going in, but I knew the character going in. So that's not a fair,
Probably
a fair
80 to 90% of people know that going in. But
you get a little bit like of like them talking about in the movie, like, oh, the wizards chose me, and then they granted the powers, and then he, and then Justice Society's talking about, we've got to get him to say Shazam. The tricky part is there's a twist in this movie that at the beginning they set you up to think that the Rock's character is like this boy hero, but instead he's the more passive like father of that boy hero, from 5,000 years ago. And I think what this movie wasn't able to do is, in the Shazam movies, you get to play around a lot with him saying like Shazam and changing form back and forth. They literally could not do that, because the first time you do that, you turn into like an adult male instead of like a child, or something like that, then it sort of like gives away kind of like the twist at the end. So that was sort of like the struggle that they ran into. I think their twist maybe shot their ability to sort of like play around with some of the fun of it, and also build some more like understanding of kind of like what this is through the middle portions of the movie.
Yeah, I was just surprised that there wasn't a stronger, I don't know, dialogue passage that maybe explained it a little bit. Like the Justice Society is like, oh, we got to get him to say Shazam. Well, how do they know that? Are they aware of I guess he's called Shazam now, not Captain Marvel. I don't even remember anymore. But like, are they drawing on knowledge of Shazam to like help them out here? I don't know. I just felt like it could have been better explained. I think a lot of people are probably scratching their heads a little bit on the linkages between the two. But to their credit, they did have the wizard from the Shazam movie in Black Adam as a member of this council of wizards that bestowed the powers on the Black Adam character. So at least, visually it's the same character. We can create that link. But I don't know, 3 years from seeing that movie, that a lot of people would necessarily make that jump.
What if you had a scene where like, and so again, this is, the problem with sometimes like movies that have issues is you try to fix them, and it becomes a lot of like, a lot of movie what ifs. But if you had to see, so you have this like building of the Justice Society as they're gathering their like the two more experienced members, and then they're getting their two more junior members together. What if like the four of them just showed up at like Shazam, like, the character Shazam's house, and like him and like all of his like adopted siblings are getting ready to go on a thing. They're just like, yeah, there's a dude who's got powers just like yours. And he's like, and Shazam's just like, man, I got midterms, or I've got like finals coming up. Like, I'm a kid. I'm not going to do, or whatever it is. And they could have just taken a moment to remind us that the Shazam character also had those powers. While also maybe playing up something about isn't it weird that we're like trying to bring a bunch of these kids to come fight this one between the Shazam and then the younger.
Yeah.
You can have some fun with that, but I'm having some little power flickers here. So
I see that.
Oh, did we just lose Will? I wonder if
think
his
we might have
power
lost. I think his
totally
power might
flickered
have
out.
tripped off. So
Yeah.
I'll pick this up a little bit, so just so we can continue. Maybe he'll join back with us. Sorry for that. We lost Will mid sentence due to power issues somewhere in Texas. Anyway, did you
Wait, Texas has power issues? No.
This is, you know what this is? This is Ted Cruz getting back at the people who booed him last night and jeered him last night.
Could be.
I guess he's had a rough couple of days.
Poor Ted
God,
Cruz. Anyway,
God knows he doesn't deserve any of that.
All right, away from
I joke.
politics and back to what you
Yes.
were about to
Okay.
say.
Yeah. So the Justice League. I don't think the movie did any kind of a job really explaining what the hell they were. I mean, they just kind of appeared for me.
Yeah.
And while I like, I like Aldous Hodge and Pierce Brosnan, didn't know at all about. So we got Aldous Hodge, who's some kind of hawk man, and he looks a lot like other superheroes that we've had that look like birds and have wings and fly around as their superpower. And then Pierce Brosnan kind of looks like almost like a Magneto kind of character. So it's funny that there's a lot of like parallelisms between the comic universes, and for somebody like me who's not fluent in either comic universe, it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. I think the movie does try to set up where the Justice Society team is coming from. We have this whole scene where Amanda Waller, the character from the Suicide Squad movies, basically appears, and she's talking to Hawkman. She's talking to these people and setting up that they're a team that's basically working for her, and she's sending them in. And so, there's this agency that she works for. We've seen it in the Suicide Squad movies. Amanda Waller has popped up in a couple of other places. Viola Davis, great job as that character. But I could see where, like, if you weren't maybe paying hyper attention when they initially explained that, you might have missed it, and you might have been scratching your head as to where they came from. So
maybe some of the action bludgeoned me into a nap. I don't know.
It's entirely possible.
Yeah.
The other thing is, they're trying to create this DCEU pantheon of movies, right? They want all the movies to be interrelated and connected. The problem is when it's been 3 or 4 years between movies coming out that it's referencing Shazam and Suicide Squad, you may not necessarily remember, oh, right, this is that character from Suicide Squad, or, oh, right, the wizard was involved with Shazam. You know what I mean? Unless you're really a huge comic fan. You know what I mean? You can only go off of what the movie has given you. So maybe those linkages could have been a little bit stronger. We had Amanda Waller at the beginning and at the end, but I could definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I didn't really, I never really bought into the two younger characters of the Justice Society. I don't even remember their names. I just remember that they would jump out of an airplane and go down and try to help out. But so yeah, I just didn't care about these characters, and every time they were on the screen, I'm like, can we get back to anything else, please?
I'll tell you, one of my complaints about this movie are the two characters that you're referencing, Atom Smasher and Cyclone. I think that the effects of Cyclone, I know Will liked them. He liked the colors, but I thought they were so fucking goofy. Seeing her be like,
a few times we saw it, 2 or 3 times.
Several times. And she's doing it at slow-mo, so it looks like she's like,
Yeah.
And then Atom Smasher can like grow big, and like there's always a joke with him, like, oh, sorry, my bad, I knocked down a whole building. And I just felt like the comedy with the Atom Smasher character was not super great, very not memorable. And I think the Cyclone character, like, she can blow things around, Like, I'm sorry, you're fighting someone that is on the same power level as Superman, and you're telling me that like you're gonna bring someone who can just make the wind blow?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did really love Pierce Brosnan as Dr. Fate, and I thought that Aldous Hodge did a fantastic job as Hawkman. I have wanted silver screen versions of these characters for the longest time, and it was really, really cool to see how they were brought to life on screen. I also have to say that Will is back. Yay! Welcome back, Will.
Hey, well,
Will, we're talking about the Justice Society characters, and I was just saying I didn't find Atom Smasher or Cyclone particularly great, but I really loved Dr. Fate, and I really liked Hawkman. I want to focus on Pierce Brosnan for a second because holy fuck, he was giving me daddy vibes with that salt and pepper goatee.
Yeah.
Oh, I was so here for it every time he took that helmet off.
speaking of daddy vibes, the movie intimated that those two, the two Hawkman and what was the Dr. Fate character, had a strong, I'll just call it a friendship relationship. You know, kind of like they would sacrifice each other, you know, for the benefit of the other one. And I know I'm gay, and like you know, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, but I thought the movie was this close to like having them have an actual like love partner or life partner relationship. The way they were kind of fawning over each other and willing to sacrifice themselves for each other. Of course, the movie did not do that. I was like, oh, this could kind of this could totally like save the movie for me if they were to do that, if they had the balls to do it. But I don't think they
Jim,
would because I never heard it. What?
that's a different movie. That one's called, are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Cockman and Dr. Bate.
Wow.
I'd
Wow.
watch it.
That's
yeah.
the porn version, right?
That's the porn
I didn't
version.
say they had to have sex. I'm just saying maybe they had an off-screen, like real, like life partner relationship. I think that would have been really cool.
I don't know. I don't think it's like a matter of when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. I think it's more like
the movie teased me.
No, when you're like in the desert, you'll look for any drop of water you can find, right? And we don't get we don't get a lot of like representation in certain mainstream films. That's why things like Bros and Fire Island very recently from the
got it in Eternals.
We did get it in Eternals. And we're getting
spoilers for Eternals.
Spoilers for Eternals, yeah.
Mild spoilers. We don't really give away any.
You know, so I don't know. I think what I like so much about the Pierce Brosnan character in here is, you know, Dr. Fate is a favorite comic book character of mine. I really like Dr. Fate. Do I think he had enough to do? I don't know. He got some to do, which is more than a lot of people got to do. I mean, honestly, if you cut Black Adam out of this and you make this movie like Dr. Fate and Hawkman, I would watch the hell out of that.
A Justice. Maybe, you know, we could have benefited from. Now, maybe you guys know this, but did the Justice Society appear in other DC films prior to this? Were they? No. See, that's another thing. It's like I almost wish that there was some background in the films for these characters.
These characters had stakes, but those stakes were set up and then immediately resolved within the course of the film. So I didn't get a chance to really feel what they were going for as much as I wanted to. And I'm on the more positive side of Atom Smasher and Cyclone in that I think the actors did a great job. I thought there was some fun energy there. They just had nothing to do except for give puppy eyes to each other and then do a couple things in fights. But if you had a movie that was more fleshed out with those four characters, maybe a fifth or whatever, you know, but that they got a chance to do a little bit more, have arcs of their own instead of just, you know, being whimsical in the background of someone else's arc. I think this could have been a lot more fun than it was. Like, it's weird. Black Adam, Black Adam is the worst part of the Black Adam movie, and that's a weird thing to say. But I just feel like this movie kind of suffered from, it's that whole thing that DC's struggled to figure out. Does it do its own thing? Does it do its own Snyderverse thing? Does it try to mirror what the MCU did? And I think they've had a lot of different sort of like chefs in the kitchen saying different things, and so the movie feel like a hodgepodge of things. And here you get exactly that. You get the whole like, we want to do world building like Marvel does, but without the legs to do it, like, so it sort of like crams it into a smaller package. It wants to be more energetic and fun, but it also realizes that it exists. It wants to put Black Adam eventually up against Superman, and that exists in the Snyderverse movie. So you have to have a certain aesthetic, but you also have to tweak away from that aesthetic. So this movie had so many, like, it was like it was going jogging, but before it did, it was strapping a bunch of weights onto its ankles and wrists before it could even do so. And I just don't think it had enough endurance to pull it off with all that baggage.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to ask if maybe you don't have issues with this, but I kind of do. It seems like in this movie, it seems like there are characters that are set up at least visually and physically to look like other comic book property characters, right? The Hawkman in this what's the Marvel character that flies around with the wings?
Yeah, so the Falcon.
Who's that?
The Falcon.
Right?
No, I'm sorry, Captain America.
Well, he's Captain America.
Captain America now. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
But he was the
Falcon / Captain America. Even the guy the Smasher guy, he has his mask on. Who's he look like?
Deadpool.
He looks
Deadpool,
like
and he's the jokey one.
Ant-Man
Go
powers.
figure. Go figure. It seems a little bit like cloying to kind of like a thinly veiled attempt to kind of.
But if you're DC, what do you do? Like,
right?
You've had 70
can't
plus
be original.
years of competing against each other, coming out with characters. Fucking Captain Marvel himself originally was Captain Marvel on DC, and then Marvel came out with their version. So
I'm not going to say which one was first because I don't know. I just know that they're a little too similar, and it just seems weird to me.
Well, it's always been sort of the thing that's existed within the comics is that there's always an analog, right? You always have a character who is an analog in some way, shape, or form of the ones from the other. Because if you think about it, in the 40s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, every generation of comics, these were two competing comic book companies that were trying to draw an audience base, and were also spitting creators back and forth to one another.
Right.
And so you get a lot of that too. I mean, Hawkman as a character was created in the 1940s. I think Falcon came out in the late 60s, 70s, somewhere in that range, right? So from an aesthetics perspective, I mean, Hawkman had it 30 years first, but from a movie's perspective, Falcon's hit there a decade first. So yeah, it is hard for DC. I think what you do in that case, it goes back to the point I was making before. I think if you know that if you're going to have a flying winged character, you're going to get compared to the flying winged character. If you're going to have a growing character, you're going to get compared to the growing character. You put more time in to really develop them and figure out why this particular flying winged character is interesting and compelling of their own. And so having this, what I consider to be a really interesting Hawkman character, who a lot of his interesting stuff was sort of like off screen, off panel, in the background stuff, I think hurts overall because it doesn't really let him spread those wings and truly fly on his own.
Yeah. Agreed.
All right. I think there's one more thing for us to talk about before we put this conversation to bed. Will, you had mentioned Superman, and he came up earlier as part of this discussion. I think when you were you weren't blacked out, but your power and internet were blacked out.
Yeah.
I was saying, bringing a character who can make the wind blow to beat up at someone on Superman's power level is a weird choice, but Superman himself ends up showing up at the end of this movie in the mid-credits sequence. Where was Superman before? I don't know. Off planet or something. Who knows? But apparently all Amanda Waller has to do is make a phone call and Superman is there.
She's like, don't get too big for your britches, Black Adam, because I know somebody who's better than you. And then Superman comes in and says, remember, I'm better than you. We'll see later on.
I love Viola Davis. I love Amanda Waller. I dislike so much the comic book. Oh, I'm sorry, the movie Amanda Waller's, because she just makes terrible decision after terrible decision to the point where it's almost laughable. I mean, if you think about the Suicide Squad, the first Suicide Squad movie, it was like the kind of the same thing. Like, let's throw the guy with boomerangs and the guy with the gun against this, like, you know, ancient demon witch. So we get a little bit of, like, this is Amanda Waller's MO. She's just like, I think she looks to her right, she looks to her left, she grabs a stack of manila folders and she just says, take these people. So that's kind of what it feels like happened here.
Yeah, it does. And you know, it's one of those things that even the DC shows on the now defunct CW has had to struggle with. When you have multiple superheroes living on the same planet in the same universe and a giant world-ending event happens and only one superhero is there and all the other ones are gone and not even referenced, it's like, well, wait a second, how the fuck does that happen? Like, this would be a Justice League all hands on deck world-ending event if Black Adam showed up. Why is Amanda Waller sending the team that she does? I don't know.
Yeah.
But Superman does show up.
Yeah.
Jim, to your point, he doesn't specifically say, I will kick your ass and then throw you in a meat grinder. He just says, you know, hey, I think we need to talk. And I think it's inferred that, like, they're going to have a discussion
to talk with our
about
fists. Yeah.
the responsible use of power. But I actually got spoiled on Superman's appearance, which, as a huge Superman fan, I was both happy to hear that he was in the movie, but I was bummed to find out ahead of time.
Because imagine the thrill you would have got at the end if you did.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it still was thrilling. Don't get me wrong. But knowing it going in was a little bit of a letdown. But I knew it from The Rock himself, guys. The Rock put out 2 tweets. One where he basically said the most powerful man in the universe shows up, who isn't He-Man, so weird word choice, The Rock, shows up and Black Adam and him have to talk. And then he puts out another tweet saying that the next pet project he wants to make is a Black Adam versus Superman movie. So it's like, he didn't explicitly say Superman shows up, but like, he said Superman shows up. And
listen,
if you look at the cast on Google for this movie, within the first like 5 faces that they show, Henry Cavill's one of them. So it totally gives it away.
I didn't see that because I didn't look at it beforehand. But hey,
that's
Dwayne Johnson
Dwayne
Johnson, I'm sure, throws a lot of weight around in Hollywood, right?
Yeah.
With these studios. He is a draw. Like, people are gonna go. Look, we went to the movies. We went to see this at a matinee early Sunday afternoon in one of those big DFX theaters, right? One of those huge big
IMAX, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And it was surprisingly, it wasn't full by any means, but it was surprisingly, well attended, I thought. So, I mean, that's good to see in terms of people coming back to the movies. But I was a little bit surprised at the draw that this movie had. And I don't fully understand it. I'm sure there's reasons, but I bet one of those reasons is Dwayne Johnson.
Well, one of the things I think is interesting to kind of call out here, 2 things. One, we had a lot of people clapping at a few points during the movie in our audience. They were into it. And if you look at Rotten Tomatoes, it's interesting. The critic score is 39%. The audience score is 90%. That is a huge disparity. And not that a Rotten Tomatoes score is the end all be all, of anything. It's just a barometer with tomato themes. But I do think it's interesting that, like, the critics and the main audience are just so far apart from each other. And it makes me wonder if, like, maybe the average moviegoer who was clapping in our film, Jim, got a lot more out of this than maybe we did.
That's exactly why I said at the beginning when I entered the movie, and my opinion of it, like I may not be, in this movie's like, uh, uh, audience demographic in terms of like who they're aiming this movie at, because obviously 90% of the folks that saw this movie and commented on it and graded it on Rotten Tomatoes liked it enough to give it a positive rating. So.
Well, and there's also the problem with Rotten Tomatoes too for movies exactly like this is it's such an awkward barometer, right? Like what ends up happening is you get both positive and negative review bombs for certain things on the audience side of things, even before, in some cases, even before movies come out. Like this movie also cared, not to say that there's no, I don't want to like take anything away like that, but there's also with certain movies, like you get like the Snyderverse crew that'll come out and be like anything that's part of that, they're going to immediately like, positive review it because they want more of that. And then you'll get certain movies where like the first time, if there's like a black lead or a queer lead, like it'll get review bombed down all the way. So it's really hard to look at all that. It's why, what you really just do is, as with anything, that the three best sources of like whether or not you should watch a movie, I believe, find a couple of like critics and reviewers that, you like their stuff and listen to their stuff. Don't look at aggregate scores, but listen to a couple people that you like listening to. Listen to your friends and listen to yourself. And that's always going to be the case. That's the true barometer of whether a movie works or not. Here it's, the tough thing with The Rock and what he's doing is he does carry this like Hollywood weight. And, he's kind of flexed a little bit of that with Black Adam, really going out there and like making some statements that he really wants to be sort of like the center of the new DC universe. And I think that's really where he wants to be. I don't know that this movie was strong enough to support that. And that's unfortunate. But I mean, he's a star, you can, literally any movie he makes, people will show up and go see it. Right. Because, he makes roller coaster movies, and roller coasters are fun. Hell, the last movie he made with this same director was Jungle Cruise, which is, a roller coaster movie,
Yeah.
So, I think there's always going to be a place for movies
which probably
like
has
this.
the exact same scores as this movie.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think there's always going to be a place for movies like this. And I think that's great. I just don't know that I'm always going to be like, feel like super welcome at the table, because like some movies just aren't for everyone,
Sometimes though, and I say this with love, sometimes I think we talk ourselves out of a seat at the table in the interest of being critics. Like watching a movie from a critical point of view versus just going to watch a movie to have fun and see what it does, I think changes how you look at movies. I know it's changed the way that I view movies. It used to be I would just go and show up and have a good time with something. But 10 years ago, we started this podcast, and then I started looking at things like the pacing of the movie and the cinematography of the movie. And, how was the sound editing of the movie? And, how was this actor's performance compared to this performance in this other movie? And I end up talking myself out of a lot of the good things that I initially enjoyed, because I'm looking at it with a critical eye. So I don't know. I see where you're coming from, Will. I just think that it's hard for movie critics to have the same experience sometimes as the average moviegoer.
Yeah.
And maybe that's reflected in this scoring.
But that's probably true. But I think, for me personally, I go into every movie wanting to enjoy it. Like I go into every movie with the idea of this is a 100% score, like 5 out of 5 until the movie proves me otherwise. Right. I want to, movies aren't cheap. My time isn't cheap. I want to enjoy every fucking second I spend at the movies. So, for me personally, like when it doesn't happen, like that's an honest reaction. This movie just didn't click for me, not because I was trying to like critique it or review or anything like that. It's because I went through the experience and wasn't engaged. And I think part of it too, there is one other disconnect point too. Like realistically, when the only movie you see within like the week or within the month is like Black Adam, it's probably the best movie you saw the week or within the month, and that's okay. Some people don't go off and do that. If I've listened to like just certain types of music, that's going to be what I gravitate towards. But there's so many better movies out there too, and so it's hard when you're watching more movies to also not have that weighing in. Not again because you're critiquing them, but because when you're watching like a really solid movie and then you watch a movie that's subpar by comparison, you can't help but feel disappointed.
Yeah, but it's like, are you watching, a really cool indie superhero movie to compare this big budget Hollywood studio superhero movie against? Or are you comparing a superhero movie against fucking Midnight or something? You know what I mean? I'm just saying it can be a little bit difficult, I think, sometimes to take that critic hat off and enjoy things.
And that's why these movies like this, these tentpole movies, don't generally do as, even if they're great, they don't generally like hit that super high bar that critically that some other movies that aren't the cookie cutter get. I think as we see more movies and as we review more movies and as we figure out what works for us personally, right? Like what works for you, Will, what works for you, Brad. I think you'll sit in a movie, maybe like this one, Will, and you'll say, this isn't working for me because this characterization was kind of terrible, the way they wrote this character. Whereas another moviegoer might not care, right? As long as they are entertained by shit blowing up, you know what I mean? That's great. And that's where you get these big disparities, I think, between critic scores and general audience scores. Because if you go to this movie to see The Rock flex his muscles and show his butt and
blow shit up
and blow shit up and walk through at least 20 walls, then you're gonna get that in this movie, and you're gonna walk away happy.
I guess
even though the characterization was flat and everything we mentioned,
Yeah, my problem there is though, I don't think this is like if I were only comparing this against other big budget superhero movies, I still think this is below the 50% mark, like in terms of like overall quality. So like take other things out of them. If you just take only tentpole superhero movies or things that are like tentpole superhero movies, like Fast and Furious, Jurassic World, kind of like that style of film, like big entertainment, big push. I don't think this is like at the high end of that totem pole. Like if I'm just comparing like did I have fun with this versus other movies of that type? I don't know that I did, so that's my problem. Like, again, I go to each one and say, did this movie do what it was supposed to do? Did it thrill me? Did it make me cry? Did it make me laugh? Every movie has like its goal, right? Bros wanted to make me feel a certain way. Black Adam wanted to make me feel a certain way. Whatever it has to do makes me want to feel a certain way. How well did it like meet up to its brand promise? And this one for me, like it just felt like it just didn't hit all of the promise, fully. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, and that's a great setup for our just announced 10-part series on how we explore the differences between general audience reception and critic reception of movies.
I think it'd have to be at least a 12-part series, Jim.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think so.
I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you guys, and this is, I don't know, this is probably not great to say hosting a podcast with you all, but like, I feel like watching movies for the podcast really hurts my experience watching movies sometimes because I'm watching it with a critic hat on as opposed to just like going to see a movie and have fun with it and see what happens. And it's interesting. There are other critics. Will, you mentioned like finding a couple people that you really like and maybe you're in line with their opinions. I've seen so many critics, a few of them that we know, like dumping on this movie and like using it as a way to like prop themselves up as like God's gift to movie criticism. And I don't know. I guess that's why I don't put a lot of stock in critic scores. I don't read critic reviews of movies a lot. I go to Reddit. I go to the comments section to see what like mainstream movie going audiences are saying, because I feel like, I don't know, that's maybe a more accurate barometer as opposed to just like putting shit out in a vacuum bubble of people who agree with you all the time. But I think that's a bigger conversation than obviously, we have time or ability for right now. But I don't know. I found it interesting that the scores were so disparate, and that's my theory as to potentially why we see some difference.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like I've seen since doing the podcast and since becoming really even a step further interested in movies, all kinds of movies, whether it be big tentpole movies, superhero movies, small dramas, indie horror movies, whatever. I've seen so many movies that I know, at least for me, what's good, what works, right?
Yes.
Right. I know for me what works. And so that means I also know what doesn't work. Right. And so, and that's just the way I call it. It's not because I'm looking at it through a critical lens. I'm just saying, where's the thing I love from movies that I'm not getting from this movie? Where is it? Please, movie, give it to me. Oh, you're not going to? Well, I'm not going to like you.
To be clear, I'm not saying that we're like jerking ourselves off at film school. I'm just saying in terms of like, thousands of critics weighing in with their opinion versus thousands of normal movie going audience people weighing in with their opinion. I think it makes sense that there's a difference because not all of these people who are the normal audience have gone to film school. Not all of these people are movie critics who talk about movies on a weekly podcast or, write reviews for their magazines or whatever. It's kind of like becoming a chef. The worst thing you can do if you enjoy going out to eat is becoming a chef because you pick everything fucking apart. Does that mean that like your opinion as a chef is bad? No, of course not. Because you're coming at it from a standpoint of knowledge. The noodles weren't cooked long enough. The right amount of spices weren't used. It doesn't trip your flavor profile, whatever. That doesn't make those things invalid. But like if you set a plate of, I don't know, veal parmigiana down in front of a food critic and the same exact plate in front of like a normal, person who would just come into the restaurant on a given Thursday, you're probably going to get the normal person saying, oh man, this is really good. I liked it. And the critic is going to be like, well, the sauce was a little thin and, it's just
overspiced.
It's a dichotomy.
And I think it helps too. And this is something I did on like sort of like first episode in here. And I've always thought this, like, I'm not a critic. I've never thought of myself as a critic, and I won't ever think of myself as a critic. I think an actual critic does something kind of beyond what we do, which is you examine not just like whether or not I liked the marketability of product I enjoyed, which is
and you're paid for it.
Yeah, well, you can be or you can't be, but I think good critique, art critique, music critique, is really much more about how the thing that you're exploring exists within both the history of the medium, within the zeitgeist of what's happening right there. It's this whole separate thing that is that is valuable of its own thing. That's not what we are. We're movie reviewers, right? And I think that that's not to say it's a lesser version of the thing. What we're doing is I come into every one of these. And again, this is what's helped me. I come into every one of these just saying, I saw a thing. What did I feel about it? Like, we've always said like our whole vibe is like, if we were just a bunch of guys like hanging out outside of the theater, how would we feel about this movie? And that's where I approach it from. So I think the right approach, and again, with everything, scores are bullshit. All scores are bullshit. Assigning number value to enjoyment is it's hard. So what you do is you just listen to the people who most align, whatever that happens to be. And I would encourage most people for it to be a smattering of both. Listen to your friends, listen to a couple of people who have some experience with it. Listen to, like Reddit, just figure out kind of like what that right blend is for you when you're making those purchasing decisions. Because that's what a movie is. It's a purchasing decision, right?
Well, at the end of the day, only you can decide if you like a movie and what you liked about it or disliked about it. So I think this goes back to one of the things we always say. Yeah, we're doing a podcast. Yeah, people are tuning in to maybe hear what we think and hopefully share their thoughts too. But at the end of the day, like, you got to see the movie for yourself, make up your own mind, and try to avoid the bias that's out there. So it can be a bit of a challenge. But fellas, let's wrap this thing up. We've been chatting a lot longer than I thought we would about Black Adam. I think it turned into a much larger conversation that I did not intend, but it was a good one.
Chapter 1.
Indeed. But let's chat a little bit about how people can connect with us between now and the next time we record. Jim, where can people find you online?
Well, find me at Twitter, while Twitter still exists for me, under at JJP Out West. That's my initials, JJP Out West, all together. That's where you'll find me talking about movies and maybe current events and stuff like that. And then you can also look me up on Facebook, Jim Pugliafico. Send me a message there. Send me a friend request. I'll take a look at your profile and see if I see what we share, and probably add you as a friend.
All right. Awesome, Jim. Thanks so much. Will, how about you?
Yeah, Twitter, Instagram, at whatever cove. I kind of dance in and out of how much I want to use those platforms. I'm on Facebook. I use that one a lot. Just search for me by name, William Lindis. Send me a message first. Letterboxd. I put everything that I watch into Letterboxd because I love cataloging things. I'm a spreadsheet guy. Letterboxd is not a spreadsheet, but it sort of scratches that same itch for movies I've seen. And then I'm also on TikTok at the Movie Bear.
And you, Brad?
Thank you so much, Will. Appreciate that. I think I had a little bit of delay there for a second. You guys just went into hyperspeed. Yeah, so in terms of my socials, you can find me on Facebook. Just look for Brad Harris. I'm the one that has Chub, Chaser, Bear friends in common with you. You can also find me on Letterboxd and Twitter at iBradPro. And last second comment, you guys, just under the wire. Ryan Rivera. Hey, Ryan, good to see you. Says, can't believe I missed you all. I missed being live with you all. And I actually saw Black Adam as well. Ryan, awesome that you saw the movie. Sorry you missed out on most of the live broadcast, but hopefully you'll go back on YouTube or Facebook and watch from the beginning, or download the show as an audio version on your commute, or whatever. And that goes for everybody. Thank you so much for supporting the show, however you listen, whether that's live when we do this on YouTube and Facebook, or you pull down that audio file that Jim creates for you every week. We really appreciate you all tuning in time after time, episode after episode. We're just guys who like talking about movies, and it still astounds me that people tune in to hear us do that. So, that's kind of great. Thank you so much for your support, folks.
Yes, thanks to all of our friends and just people who want to hear us blabber on about movies and maybe chime in your own comments. We love when people do that.
Yeah, like we said, if there was literally no one here, we'd still probably do this each week. So just the fact that we do have people who are showing up to be a part of that is always humbling and exciting. So thank you.
Indeed. All right, everybody, have yourself a great rest of your week. Relative to when we're recording this, it's the beginning of the week for us, but you might be listening on a Friday. I don't know. Whatever day it is, enjoy the hell out of it, and we will see you all next time. Take care, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.